Hi, good evening. I'm Mary Ambrose. I'm the Chief Impact Officer for the United Way of Southeast Louisiana. Thank you for joining us for tonight's preview discussion before the big event tonight at 7. So let's just start off with some things that we do know. African American communities have long experienced inequities in financial stability, health outcomes, and educational achievement. Studies show that the economic disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic is compounding these existing inequities. The COVID-19 pandemic is a new challenge for all of us, but the human nature to help one another is not. And we see that here in New Orleans. United Way was approached by BET to help in supporting communities of color who have been disproportionately impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. United Way is doing what it always does. We're tackling the underlying social problems community by community, and our credo to fight for every person and every community is particularly resonant during this crisis when resources are stretched thin. BET and NAACP and United Way are partnering to launch a COVID-19 relief effort to provide emergency relief to African American communities affected by coronavirus-related shutdowns. The Saving Our Selves, a BET COVID-19 relief effort broadcast special will air tonight on BET at 7 p.m. and will feature virtual appearances and musical performances from some of the biggest names in music and entertainment as they share tips on how to manage, cope, and help during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. The funds raised from the event will be allocated to local United Ways in Atlanta, Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles, New Orleans, and New York City, and ultimately dispersed to community-based organizations that provide resources for financial and employment assistance, food insecurity, health screenings, and remote learning resources for out-of-school children. So you can visit UWSELA.org/help-ALICE to see a full list of the 11 programs and initiatives United Way of Southeast Louisiana and BET will fund here locally in New Orleans. So as we await the start of the special, we're hosting a live preview discussion with leaders from the African American community to frame the conversation here locally and get a better understanding of the challenges African Americans are facing in New Orleans and what solutions can help close the health equity gap. So now I'd like to introduce our guests. We have Dr. Takiesha Davis, United Way CeeLo board member and New Orleans East Hospital CEO. Thanks, Takiesha, for being here with us tonight.
Thank you for having me, Mary.
Of course. And we also have Dr. Denese Shervington, who is the founder and CEO of the Institute for Women and Ethnic Studies. And I call her the trauma guru of New Orleans because she is getting all of us to pay attention to trauma in our lives. Welcome, Dr. Shervington.
Again, thank you so much, Mary. And I'm so honored to be with you and with Dr. Davis.
Thank you. And we will have actor Wendell Pierce, who is an actor we all know right here from New Orleans, and the co-owner of WBOK 1230 AM radio, the oldest Black-owned radio station in New Orleans. And here he is. He's joining us. Welcome. Thank you for being with us, Wendell Pierce. Can you hear us? He's connecting to the audio, so he should be on with us in a little bit. So he's going to try and join us. Are you here, Wendell? Can you hear us? So we're going to let him try and connect, and we're going to just move on.
I'm on now. Hello, everyone.
Hello. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to just jump in and get started because we only have a limited amount of time. So Dr. Davis, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
What is the current situation in New Orleans as it relates to the health outcomes of African Americans?
Well, Mary, unfortunately, there are plenty of words that I could use to describe the situation, but some might not be appropriate for the broadcast. It's critical, it's shocking, it's really downright shameful. we have been experiencing health inequities in the city of New Orleans with respect to our African American community for centuries. According to the city's most recent data, African Americans die at a rate 3 times their counterparts from diabetes, 2 times at an increased rate from HIV and kidney disease. We suffer twice as much asthma, 1.5 times as much hypertension. All of these are underlying health conditions that have led to what we have seen as a disproportionate burden of the death of COVID-19. The most recent data released by the state shows that 70% of the deaths in New Orleans are in African Americans. That's 242 real people, brothers, sisters, mothers, uncles, daughters. Every African American in the city of New Orleans knows somebody personally who has died from COVID-19. When I look at my Facebook timeline, it's like a virtual obituary. That should not be acceptable, especially when we look at our counterparts who identify themselves as Caucasian, making up only 17% of the deaths when they make up nearly 35% of the population. So this is personal for all of us, extremely important for us to look at the systematic discrimination that has led to these inequities for decades and the decisions that are being made to continue to perpetuate it. We stand up drive-through testing sites, and we know that a lot of members of our community don't have access to personal vehicles. So the city, along with LCMC Health, has now set up a walk-up testing site in the Halle Grove area, one of the disproportionately impacted areas, but we're still rationing out the testing for these communities. So how can we commit to keeping our communities of color safe if we don't have a commitment to have adequate testing? So it's very important for us to not just look at COVID-19, but these underlying health conditions and what we can do about it.
So that leads to the next question. How have these health inequities developed over time in our community?
Unfortunately, they have continued to be persistent. It has developed not because we are genetically or biologically different, but that there are different and discriminatory policies and practices that create these inequities and continue to perpetuate lower socioeconomic status for African Americans in New Orleans. And so if we don't also acknowledge and address that this is not a biological issue, but a man-made issue that we can change, then we will just be checking the box again of giving people, our essential workers, that we're calling them, people of color who have increased risk of face-to-face contact, a difficult choice to make between income and health. Our population can't socially distance as we are recommending. They can't receive early testing and diagnoses. So we are continuing to see the perpetuation of this discrimination. This has developed because of those policies. I'm hopeful that not only will we be excited about short-term stimulus money and donations, but really demand, because we deserve to have more long-term solutions like national and statewide policy solutions to really change the trajectory of the health, both physical and emotional, of our African Americans in New Orleans.
I wish we could get deeper into this discussion.
I know, but Dr. Shervington and Mr. Pierce, I'm sure, can help us to do that.
They will. So, Dr. Shervington, we're going to pivot to you. How does the added layer of fear and uncertainty around work and health affect the mental health of African American communities?
I want to thank Dr. Davis for being so eloquent about the challenges. And I want to just underline the term that what we're seeing now is a result of racism. And as she said, not because of genetic differences. I've been here since Katrina, working that disaster. And as happened, but was not prepared for, whenever there is disaster, there's going to be heightened emotional reactivity. It is normal. This is the system in our body that makes us aware that there's a threat and that we should be aware. What has happened in our community is that not only do we have to deal with this heightened anxiety and fear, and many of us don't know how to manage it because we've been told you just keep it moving. There's a lot of grief, a lot of sadness. A virus that we can't see has come in and has wreaked havoc in our community. So what some of the experts in disaster have been saying is that the next pandemic we're going to have is a mental health crisis. And that crisis, of course, is going to be much more exaggerated in our communities for the host of reasons, some of which Dr. Davis mentioned earlier. But I really want people to know that we should expect to have this heightened emotionality. It's normal because we are in abnormal times, but what we need to do is to learn how to manage that anxiety. It's like a warning system, and we need to know how to have it with us and manage it so that we can make it through to the other side.
Yes, and for those individuals who are lucky enough to be employed through the pandemic, many African-American workers don't have access to basic employment protections like paid sick leave and telecommunicating options that would otherwise help them weather this crisis. So we're seeing, and I have a family member who's going through that same issue right now. So looking at all the programs that we are funding through this effort, we have 11 great programs that are providing financial assistance, some health screenings, healthcare, some equipment and technology to our students, of course, all the financial assistance and food assistance. And again, you can go and check out the list of those agencies at UnitedWaySeala.org, Help Alice. But Dr. Shervington, what are the types of programs and initiatives that are critical to recovery for the African-American community?
We're going to have to acknowledge that there is heightened risk for the trauma-based conditions, depression, PTSD, substance use, violence in the home, all of which we saw after Katrina and what we've been working to try to resolve. I think one of the things that we've been doing in partnership with Metropolitan Human Services District is trying to get out ahead of this, opening up a space, a virtual space, where we have people from not only Louisiana, but across the country, can come and have some support, learn. We have to have our community understand how to acknowledge this emotional distress, how not to avoid it, and how to manage. So any programs where we can help people learn how to manage anxiety, cope, become a little bit more optimistic through all of this sadness, the grief, the anxiety, we're going to have that. And we have to remember our children. When we don't pay attention to our children's mental health needs, unfortunately in this system, they end up being labeled with conduct disorders, ADHD, and get sent into systems that are not mental health and usually into the criminal justice system.
Thank you, Dr. Shervington. We're going to pivot to talk to Wendell Pierce. I'm excited to have you on the show. I do a United Way and You radio show every Thursday at noon on WBOK. And I got to say, your staff is excellent. I enjoy working with all of them. But Wendell, we know, and I remember working with you for Katrina, after Katrina, and you gave your heart to this city. You're from this city. But just talk about from your experience with heartbreaks and the trauma in New Orleans, how can we use what we learned from this crisis to help us move our community forward yet again?
Well, first of all, thank you for being on WBOK. We try to live up to the legacy of what that station has always been about. 70 years old, making sure that our community had a platform to voice the very concerns that we're dealing with here tonight. Both of the doctors were very eloquent and very poignant in what they were trying to point out. and what's happening. Two things come to mind. There are those who do not have our best interest at heart. So they design programs and institutionalize this racism to make sure that it's perpetuated in our communities. Object poverty, disparity when it comes to healthcare, not having access to the economic engines that we try to bring in to the greatest port in the United States, but yet we have a detachment from it. And one of the greatest economies that we have in the South, and definitely the greatest economy of Louisiana, but yet we are still a majority in the city, but a majority in poverty also. And the other thing that comes to mind is never let a good crisis go to waste. Those who do not have our best interest at heart see these opportunities to actually put the foot even deeper into our back. I'm thinking of Dr. Davis, great hospital in New Orleans East now. But I remember after Katrina, it was almost a decade before 2/3 of this city, predominantly Black, had access to a hospital. I live in Gentilly, in Pontchartrain Park. And my mother, when she was taking ill, we had to go to Truro, all the way uptown, across the city, for those of you who aren't familiar with New Orleans. And I remember one time there was a Mardi Gras parade on St. Charles Avenue, and my mother in the back of an ambulance, 5 minutes from what was Methodist Hospital, our neighborhood hospital, was about to die because we couldn't cross a parade route all the way uptown to get medical care for her at Truro. It's those examples. So the lessons that we have to learn is that I don't subscribe to this idea that we recovered from Katrina in a wonderful way. I think it is insulting. I think it is one of the great crimes of our time. What the insurance companies did to our communities, the fact that we didn't have access to healthcare, the healthcare system was destroyed in our communities so that we could give all of that energy and economy to building the trauma center downtown. And if you weren't closer to the trauma center, it's one-stop shopping. That's the only thing. The doctors can correct me if I'm wrong. We lost 100,000 African Americans from the population of New Orleans, and we've turned our communities into secondary sort of bedroom tourist homes just for Airbnb and people who are not living in our communities but are just passing through, which only benefit the few that own thousands of homes here. So what happens is we have to realize that there are those who do not have our best interests at heart and will do everything possible to make sure that our communities don't have access to not only great healthcare, but I feel as though the 21st century social justice movement is economic development. You can go right to the Lower Ninth Ward right now, and it looks as 15 years later, it looks as though Katrina happened yesterday. We have monies that are going to be coming into the city, and it's going to be siphoned away from our communities into the hands of those who have millions. You saw that just last week with the payroll protection program, when multi-million-dollar corporations got all the money from the small business administrators, small business funds that they were going out in the CARES Act, and so I think of one here after Katrina, how Mr. Burrell, starting a grocery store in the Lower Ninth Ward, got $100,000 out of a $14 million fund. But $2 million was granted to Whole Foods by Mitch Landrieu, when Whole Foods is one of the largest traded companies in the world. But yet Mr. Burrell, who's starting a grocery store in the Lower Ninth Ward, only got tens of thousands of dollars. It's that sort of disparity economically that also affects us health-wise. We don't have a network of health centers. They were always talking about them, right? In every sort of planning session, they always talk about one day we're going to have a network of critical care centers in the community going around. It's always talk. There's a lot of money that's siphoned to that discussion and to that debate, but it never gets down to where the rubber meets the road. So what we have to do is prepare ourselves to make sure that when this funding and recovery comes for COVID-19, that our communities have access to that economy so that they can build the health structures that we've been talking about for ages. Right.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I got more
I believe.
more than I expected, but better than what I expected. So thank you so much. Our time is up. It's 7 o'clock. That went really fast. So thank you all for joining us tonight, just sharing a little bit. We can all go on WBOK and do a deeper dive.
Definitely. I welcome you to the station.
Yes.
I'm one of the new owners. To both of you doctors and to you, please come and get your message out, and we can discuss this continually as the recovery happens.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And thank you all for listening. You can tune in and at WBOK, but you can learn more at UnitedWaySeala.org/help Alice. So flip over to BET to watch the special, Saving Ourselves, starting in just a few minutes, and continue the conversation here on social media.
Make a donation. Make a donation.
Thank you.
Whatever it is, if it's a quarter, make it, because we are multitudes, and those multitudes add up. So if you can just give $1, imagine every person of color gave $1 to these grassroots groups that are helping our communities right now. So everyone who's listening, please give $1 to the special on BET, which we're about to listen to right now.
Definitely. And then make sure you're on social media with the hashtag BET COVID relief. We're raising money, we are raising awareness and raising hope to fight COVID-19. So join United Way, the NAACP, WBOK, BET to help those who need it the most. So thank you and good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.